If I asked you to think of the thing which scares you the most, the thing which makes your skin crawl, the thing which makes your stomach seize up and turn over and makes you feel like running the minute that you see it, you might tell me. But for some people, the thing which scares them the most, the thing which makes them want to run screaming from the room in terror, is something whose purpose is to entertain children. Back in 1982, Steven Spielberg wrote a movie which terrified audiences for years, still does today. That movie was Poltergeist, a movie about a family being tormented by evil spirits in their own home, which was also a clever critique of capitalism. One scene in particular had people frozen in terror, and not just because of the excellent tension building. It was this scene. The juxtaposition of something whose purpose is to entertain children suddenly becoming an aggressive danger to a child. It was pretty striking, but even just the aesthetic look of a clown is deeply disturbing to some people. About 28% of people, in fact. For a lot of people, it creates a real deep-seated feeling of dread and unease when just looking at an image of a clown. But why? Why are people so afraid of something designed to be so harmless? From circus clowns and children's entertainers to It and John Wayne Gacy, we're going to look at how comedic circus characters became such a feared modern figure. Welcome to... Coulrophobia might sound like it's derived from some ancient Greek words. Well, the phobia part is, since it comes from the word phobos, which means fear. And if you watched the thalassophobia video, you'd already know. But the term coulrophobia didn't come into common usage until the late 1990s, and the coulro part of coulrophobia, unlike many other phobias, doesn't actually mean anything at all. Some people say it comes from the Greek word colon, I think that's how you pronounce it, which means limb, and is related to being afraid of stilt walkers and by extension clowns. Some people say that it originates in the Greek word for clown, kloon. Kloon? 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 I don't know how you say that word. This word. But it doesn't actually have any meaning at all, which gives us a hint that it's more of a modern phobia than a historical one. So, did movies like Poltergeist and Stephen King's It play on a fear of clowns, or did they create it? Clowns weren't always the scary figure of suspicion that they are in the modern age. In fact, the first recorded appearance of clowns was in Egypt during the 5th dynasty in 2400 BC. Back then, a clown actually served a semi-religious purpose, and the role of a clown would have been given to a religious priest, performing the role of increasing engagement with religion by mixing religious practice with comedy and performance. Kind of like an ancient Egyptian social media influencer. Yeah, you heard that right. Religion is and always has been filled with clowns. The same kind of clown figure, or role, popped up in many ancient religions, from Native American to medieval Europe. Over time, the role of the clown changed, and around about ancient Greek and Roman times, it became the rustic fool with which we're so familiar now. Rather interestingly, in medieval England, court jesters served the same function as clowns did in ancient Greece. And the English word for clown is written as clowna or cloyna, originally meant a rustic boor peasant. So when someone calls you a clown, they're literally calling you a peasant. There were many different looks for clowns in the past, but it was Joseph Grimaldi in the early 1800s who created the white face makeup, which is now ubiquitous.
Hello.
The Punch and Judy show is a traditional English puppet show originally taken from the 16th century Italian commedia dell'arte. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, hopefully I did. The show features a grotesque-looking trickster character called Mr. Punch, who has a wife called Judy, and a child. The show would feature Mr. Punch using a stick to beat his wife and the police officer. It would also feature him mishandling the baby. Although he's lacking the makeup of the clown persona, Mr. Punch plays the devious and violent trickster role with which many people associate killer clowns. In early representations, he would also murder the other characters in the play with his stick, even tricking the hangman into his own noose. More modern representations lean more into the slapstick elements and almost completely eliminate the murder, since it's primarily designed for children. We really did raise some violent psychopaths in the past. Mr. Punch also has similar exaggerated and twisted features of many killer clowns. The modern circus clown was developed in the 19th century by Philip Astley's London Riding School, which was also the world's first circus. Astley's needed a way to entertain people in between equestrian shows, and so enlisted people as clowns to provide said mid-show entertainment. There were many people over the years who played the clown role, from George L. Fox to Tom Belling Sr., but it was the performance of Victor Morrell as the fool in Ruggero Leoncavallo's Pagliacci which would give us our first example of a scary clown. In Pagliacci, one of the central roles is the fool, a clown-type figure who assists his friend in the murder of his wife after she refuses the fool's advances. He does this by convincing the husband his wife is going to elope with another man. This example of duplicitous and murderous clown is the first example that I could find, and thus solves the question of whether clowns were always scary, or whether the scary clown was an invention. This would be the only appearance of an evil clown figure until April 25th, 1940, when Bill Finger, Bob Kane, and Jerry Robinson would provide us with another insanely famous example. In 1940, DC Comics would release one of their most popular comic books of all time, Batman. In the first issue of Batman, we're introduced to a mysterious criminal with a leering grin and circus clown makeup, modelled after the man who laughs. I could keep describing the Joker for you, but in all honesty, if you don't know who this character is by now, then pop culture has clearly passed you by. This video is probably pointless. The Joker would be the first popular and mass-adopted example of the killer clown persona in the modern age, and would perpetuate and accentuate the characteristics of earlier examples. He was a murdering psychopath who would laugh at violence, show little to no remorse for any action, and engage in physical comedy whilst also behaving in a grim and violent way that would leave his victims with a grotesque smile on their face. This version of the killer clown was one of the most enduring of all, and helped to publicly cement the idea that clowns were scary, untrustworthy, and violent, which is why I find it kind of ironic that he is also one of the most popular villains in the Batman Rogues Gallery. John Wayne Gacy is one of America's most famous serial killers, and between the years of 1971 and 1978 he tortured and murdered 33 teenage boys and buried them all in the crawl space of his house in the backyard. During the whole time that he was conducting these violent acts, he was also considered an upstanding member of the community. He was a vice president of the United States Junior Chamber and precinct captain of his local area.
What kind of man was Mr. Gacy? What kind of a man? How would you characterize him?
Oh, I don't know. I characterized him. I thought he was a pretty fine person. Very good. Very. Very amiable. I liked him. Even now, I like him. I feel sorry for him that this has happened, but he's been a wonderful person, a very generous person to us.
He was even pictured with Jimmy Carter's wife Rosalind in 1975 wearing an S-pin. Now, if you don't know what an S-pin means, an S-pin is what's given to you by the Secret Service when they have checked your history and cleared you for security clearance to speak with the president or his immediate family. He was cleared by the Secret Service while he was murdering people. During most of his free time, he would dress as a clown, which he called Pogo, and attend children's parties entertaining the kids while teenage boys were slowly decomposing in his house. Gacy would lure his victims to his house or his car with the promise of a job with his contracting company. Once there, he would ply them with alcohol and proceed to trick them into handcuffs by showing them a magic trick. Gacy would cuff himself and hide the key in between his fingers and proceed to miraculously free himself from the cuffs. He would then ask the victim to wear the cuffs and he would teach them how to escape. Once the victim was cuffed, he would lean in close and tell them that the trick
is to have the key.
What remained of the poor boy's life was spent being assaulted and tortured, as Gacy would burn them with cigars and violate them with a variety of foreign objects, or sometimes partially drown them and then revive them again so that he could drown them some more. Finally, he would tie a tourniquet around the victim's neck and choke them to death, slowly, over the course of 2 or 3 hours. While Gacy didn't murder people in clown costume, he would use the same kind of subversive and devious tactics to trick his victims that typical clowns would use, and his frequent use of the clown costume at kids' parties led to him being called the Killer Clown. In 1986, Stephen King published one of his most famous and popular books, which told the story of a group of early teenage children who were terrorized in their hometown by a demonic entity who takes the form of a particularly creepy-looking clown. The demonic entity feeds on the children's fear and so chases them throughout the novel until they defeat it and get lost in the sewers and decide to have a gangbang to help find the way out of the sewers again. I'm not kidding, that's genuinely in the book. 10 fucking pages of one underage boy after another having sex with their underage female friend. Stephen King was snorting a lot of cocaine throughout the 80s. Legend has it, Pablo Escobar read this part of the book and told him, "No más cocaína para usted, Señor King." Pennywise would appear in the book like a traditional clown, at first performing comedy or offering treats and games to trick them into coming closer so that he could rip off their arms and eat them. This is probably the most widely known example of the killer clown archetype, and I'd argue it's the birthplace of coulrophobia. I think fairgrounds and circuses can be really creepy places, especially when they're abandoned or empty. Clowns too can feel creepy when they look a certain way or act a certain way. In 1981, children in Massachusetts said that a man dressed as a clown had tried to lure them into a van. The same story happened again in Phoenix in 1985, New Jersey in 91, Honduras 95, Chicago 2008. In all cases, the clowns were never seen by adults or officers, and only ever anecdotal reports from children. The story, if you think about it, is kind of similar to the Pied Piper of Hamelin. It was never confirmed if any of these sightings were real, but the reports left a lingering question in the minds of the general public. Can clowns be trusted? In 2013, in the English town of Northampton, a character was repeatedly sighted standing silently around town dressed in a similar fashion to Pennywise from Stephen King's It. But in this case, it turned out to be the work of 3 local filmmakers. This clown even had social media accounts and posted regularly. I actually remember the stories of this when it happened at the time. It was, I don't know if I'd call it a nationwide hysteria, but it was all over social media for sure. Lots of people panicking insanely about the sight of this clown. And a lot of people even signed a petition to introduce a national curfew to stop people from going outside at night so they didn't get attacked by the clown. People can be pretty dumb. In 2014, the YouTube channel DM Pranks started dressing up as a clown and scaring people who passed by as a method of getting views on his YouTube channel. During 2016, there was an epidemic of clown sightings throughout America, with police all over the country receiving reports of creepy-looking clowns in a white van. Despite local and state police and the FBI actually looking into it, no clowns were ever found harming anyone. There was a report of one boy being stabbed to death, but police could never find out if a clown was involved, and came to the conclusion that the nationwide mass hysteria about clowns had created some false reporting. There were 12 arrests throughout this year, but each time it was a teenager pulling a prank with their friends. Apart from one occasion, when it did actually turn out to be another group of filmmakers creating media hype about their short film. You might remember the story of how McDonald's ditched Ronald McDonald character. Now, everybody remembers, right? When we were growing up, that character was everywhere. Then one day, it just disappeared. And that's because it turned out that one of the people playing the role of Ronald McDonald was using the costume and his proximity to kids at kids' parties to... And if you're nodding and agreeing in memory, then congrats. You just became your own living example of how easy it is to plant false memories in people. McDonald's never had any such issue with the Ronald McDonald character. They ditched it after 500 doctors and psychologists petitioned McDonald's to ditch it, because they felt that marketing junk food to kids with friendly characters was highly unethical. And they were right. That's how easy it is to create a rumour and implant false memories, and how quickly they can spread. Aside from these stories, there are no examples of clowns hanging around and scaring people or harming them in any way. Think about that. I told you at the beginning of this video that clowns have been around since ancient Egypt, and those few stories are the only times that anyone has ever had any sort of trouble with a clown. So why are people afraid of clowns? It would be easy to point to it or John Wayne Gacy and say, that's what people are afraid of. But coulrophobia is less about the things a clown does, and more about what he represents. Clowns are liars and tricksters. They're deceivers who can't be trusted, which is also how Satan is depicted in the Bible. So if you're a religious kind of person, then a clown kind of fulfills the same role as Satan, because he too is the great deceiver. They'll laugh at your expense and they'll make you the subject of their jokes and games, whether you want it or not. They don't really seem concerned with how you feel about their joke or game, and they're more concerned with how much it entertains them. And this can make them seem as though they're lacking in empathy and make you view them with suspicion. It's also kind of dickish and selfish. The makeup too plays a large part in how unnerving clowns can be, as they create an outward appearance of someone friendly, at the same time as acting in a fashion which makes them seem untrustworthy. And psychological research shows that we treat unfamiliar faces with a high degree of suspicion and distrust, and that we even tend to think that familiar faces are happier than unfamiliar ones, even when the expression on a familiar face is an unhappy expression. It's kind of interesting. The fact that they wear makeup at all only adds to this feeling of unease, because it's hard to read the intent of a person in clown makeup due to the artificial smiles painted on their face. For children, this is actually a positive, as research shows that children take many of their emotional cues from the expressions of adults around them. In adults, however, it's less helpful, as we are fully aware that the expressions painted on their face and the way that they behave might not reflect a clown's inner intent or feeling. They're also not something most people are overly familiar with, since many of us never encounter an actual clown in real life. Our experience of clowns is vicariously collected through stories, books and movies, often which depict them negatively. Finally, they're fake. All the emotions they display, the friendliness, the laughter, are merely imitations designed to elicit a response from you. Their true thoughts and feelings are hidden behind layers and layers of makeup and performance. And popular media has taught us that when a clown doesn't elicit the desired response, he'll provoke another one intentionally. For clowns in real life, that means that they might provoke surprise by squirting you with water from a fake flower. And in fiction, they provoke fear by attacking or intimidating their victim. In both cases, there is a real level of deception, even if in real life there's no malicious intent. This makes coulrophobia perhaps the only phobia completely manufactured by media and not really rooted in any evolutionary psychology, which is really interesting. Fear of clowns is an irrational fear. Irrational because there's actually no examples of clowns being dangerous. So the next time you find your breathing becoming shallow with panic at the sight of a clown, remind yourself.
There are no dangerous clowns.